All right, so today I'm going over two fragrances from the house of French Avenue. One being Vulcan Baie from French Avenue. So this is their take on Stefan Humbert Lucas's Pink Boa. And then the other one being Chaos Extrait, which is their take on Headspace's Kirsch. So I have already kind of given like first impressions videos of both of these, but this is going to be like my final thoughts on both of these fragrances. All right. So just to get started here with the notes, I'm going to start with the notes of Pink Boa and Vulcan Baie. So for the top notes of Pink Boa, that's going to be black currant, rosemary, blackberry, and bergamot. In the mid, you get raspberry, vodka, basil, and lily of the valley. And then in the base notes, you get strawberry, musk, sandalwood, peach, amber, patchouli, and incense. Now for Vulcan Baie, it looks like it appears to be almost about the same. It may even be the same. So yeah, you get in the top notes of Vulcan Baie, you get blackcurrant, blackberry, rosemary, and bergamot. And then in the mid, you get vodka, raspberry, basil, and lily of the valley. And in the base, you get strawberry, musk, amber, sandalwood, peach, patchouli, and incense. So I believe that is like the exact same note breakdown, basically. Now, for the note breakdown between Kirsch as well as the Chaos Extrait, for Kirsch, there's no like top, mid, or anything like that. For Kirsch, you just get cherry, suede, saffron, sake, rum, iris, woody notes, ambroxan, and oak moss. And then for the Chaos Extrait, with this one, you get cherry and red fruits in the top notes. In the mid, you get iris. And then in the base, you get leather, vanilla, and moss. So definitely a different sort of note breakdown between Chaos and Kirsch. And what I'm going to start off with here is I'm going to start off with comparing the Vulcan Baie along with Pink Boa. So this is, like I mentioned before in my previous video, to me, this fragrance, the way that it's done, at least in the French Avenue version, in my opinion, is definitely more of sort of like a feminine leaning type of fragrance. You know, this to me, the way that it comes across, it doesn't even necessarily come across necessarily as like unisex to me. It's definitely more of like a feminine, I would say kind of like a Victoria's Secret style, you know, fruity type of scent. That's the best way for me to kind of describe this. Now, compared to the original Pink Boa, I definitely think that I like the Pink Boa a lot more than I do this version. And the reason for that is Pink Boa, I can definitely tell this has a lot more detail to it. So for sure, like when it comes to like the that vodka note, I feel like that vodka note that's in both of these technically is definitely a lot more prominent in the Pink Boa. You get more sort of like a alcoholic, boozy type of feel. Both have that sort of like, you could say almost kind of like pink lemonade type of smell to them. But to me, it comes across a lot more crisper, a lot more detailed, and you know, I would say a little bit more interesting in the original from Stefan Humbert Lucas. This to me, it smells a little bit more flat. Definitely not as heavy on the vodka at all. And I would even say really the tiny bit of, you could say, vodka or booziness that you do get from this fragrance, it just doesn't smell as high quality or as detailed as what it does in Pink Boa. So, you know, this definitely, it smells like a more kind of watered down, I would say slightly more kind of fruity and more like feminine, leaning version of, Pink Boa. Again, I think both scents are definitely, feminine leaning in general. But I think that the Vulcan Baie, the way that this comes across, it leans a little bit more feminine to me. Now, the other thing that I noticed with the two fragrances were this, to me, the Vulcan Baie, it didn't perform as well, in my opinion, as what the original Stefan Humbert Lucas Pink Boa did. So like the entire time that I would say that I was wearing the two fragrances, Pink Boa definitely was pushing off my skin a lot more than what the Vulcan Baie did. Which, maybe that is something that may change over time with maturation. I know that was definitely, the case initially with like the the Vulcan bottle that comes in the blue, what is it, Vulcan Few or Vulcan Foy, however you pronounce it. That particular fragrance, like when I first got it, I want to say maybe for like the first week or two, didn't necessarily have like the best performance, and then after that, it started to improve. I've had this now for, I don't know, probably at least like 3 to 3.5 weeks, maybe even longer than that. So I've had it a decent amount of time, and each time that I wear it, side by side with the Pink Boa, it just doesn't seem to perform as well as what Pink Boa does. Both in terms of longevity and the projection. Like I said, the projection on Pink Boa, at least for me anyway, is like at least an arm's length or so. It's really good. Definitely can smell that fragrance just kind of jumping off of me. And this one, I would say the Vulcan Baie is more so kind of like, I would say probably around a half an arm's length, maybe a little bit more, but not really that much more. So I mean, you have that, and then this fragrance, the Pink Boa, the last time that I wore this, like I put it on like maybe late afternoon, going into the evening or so. And I remember waking up the next day and I could still smell this on, the arm that I sprayed it on. Whereas with the Vulcan Baie, I couldn't necessarily, I definitely couldn't pick it up as well as what I could, with the original Pink Boa. So, again, possibly this could get better with maturation. But I would say, at least for me, again, the sort of, boozy alcoholic feel that you get from, Pink Boa is kind of missing in this fragrance. Also, Pink Boa, to me, it comes across a little bit more like fizzier overall than what this does. Like I said, this definitely comes off a little bit more flatter, fruitier, I would say, for sure. And, kind of more so towards like the feminine leaning side. It just overall, I would say this kind of, it smells like pink lemonade juice, just like with nothing else in it. Whereas this to me kind of smells like a spiked, sparkling sort of pink lemonade is what I would say is what you get more so from like the Stefan Humbert Lucas Pink Boa. So that's why I feel like this one definitely is a little bit more interesting. I'm a big fan of, like alcoholic notes in fragrances. So I think that's why I definitely like this one a little bit more than what I do the Vulcan Baie, because like I said, I really don't pick up on too much of any of like that sort of fizziness or any of like the vodka in the French Avenue Vulcan Baie. All right. So if I'm going to give this one a, and first, I guess just for like the longevity on this, the longevity on the actual Pink Boa, I would say is closer to like around like that 6 hour mark or so. Whereas, like I said, with the Pink Boa, I got well over 8. All right. Now for the closeness rating on the Vulcan Baie, closeness rating on this, I would say is probably like around 80 to 85% close. So, I mean, it's not a terrible interpretation at all. I think if you're someone who likes the Pink Boa scent profile, and you're just not looking to spend, the extremely high price that Stefan Humbert Lucas fragrances go for, especially considering that you're only getting a 50 ml bottle with those fragrances, then, I would say definitely look into this. But if you're very well versed with that particular scent, the Pink Boa scent, and you're looking for something that's like a replacement for it, I would say this is probably not going to be it. Not exactly it. All right. But it is still a very solid choice, for the price. All right. So again, I'll give this one about an 80 to 85% in terms of closeness. And then as far as my overall rating goes on this, for me, this is like a 5 out of 10. Like I said, it's just not for me because it's definitely a more feminine leaning, scent. In my opinion, it's just strictly feminine. But, again, obviously you can wear what you want. It's just not necessarily for me. Would I wear, or, I guess, would I buy a bottle of Pink Boa over this? No, I wouldn't say that either. I still think that this scent just overall is a very kind of like feminine leaning type of scent. But, I guess if you put a gun to my head and told me that I had to wear one of these, then yeah, I would definitely choose the Stefan Humbert Lucas Pink Boa. All right. So that's my take on Vulcan Baie. All right. And then for Chaos Extrait, this fragrance, I think, is a very, very solid fragrance. All right. I don't think that it's not better than the original, is what I'll say for sure. It does do a good job for what it is, but in my opinion, the original is just really, really, really well done. It really is. Like I mentioned before in the previous video where I mentioned this fragrance, this has a slightly different texture than what Kirsch by Headspace has. So Kirsch, to me, it wears a lot more kind of like airier and lighter, and just overall it smells a little bit more natural and more higher quality. Whereas this kind of smells like a cheaper, sweeter, denser sort of clone of that fragrance. Like that's the best way for me to kind of describe it. Also, there's some tweaks that are made to this fragrance, or like some twists, I guess you could say. So like I mentioned, the texture of this fragrance is not exactly the same as what it is in Kirsch. So in this one, I feel like you're getting more of sort of like a denser, sweeter feel to the fragrance. You're not getting as much of like that sort of sake note that you get from the original fragrance. That sake is really not, I would say, that present for sure, is what I would say. And the leather is also the main thing that I would say is definitely dialed back a lot more in Chaos Extrait. Now, for some people, that may actually be a good thing. I'm typically, the type of person that really doesn't gravitate towards leathery types of scents. That's, typically not like a note that I'm really that fond of. But I think the way that it's done in Kirsch, mixed with that sake and rum and, like the cherry, I think overall it's really, really well done in that fragrance, and it really is a very sexy type of fragrance. This again is, I would say, serviceable for sure, especially for the price that you get for it, but this is not going to be as close to the original as what something like the Aether Extrait is to Parfums de Marly's Greenleaf that comes in like the same style bottle. This is not going to be as close to the original as what that is. Now, I do have the Atlantis, I believe is what it is. It's the one that comes in the blue bottle like this. So I'll be comparing that one to Wave Child. Hopefully that is, very, very close to Wave Child. But yeah, I would say so far, this one doesn't seem to be like a exact like 1-to-1 or or so to the original. This is definitely more of like a twist, and you could definitely tell that it's not as high quality as what the original fragrance is. So yeah, man, I would say, for me anyway, I really enjoy like that really kind of like really smooth, suede, really boozy and leathery type of scent that you get from the original Kirsch. This one for sure, I feel like you get a little bit more rum from this, and so the rum in this is a little bit more on kind of like the sweeter side. It's a little bit more sweeter. So is the cherry. This also, it has like that red fruits note, so I feel like that's also adding to a little bit of the sweetness. It just doesn't come across the exact same way again as what Kirsch does. Now also too, you can get your hands on Kirsch. Mind you, it's not for like a full 100 ml bottle, but I've seen sites selling like the 30 ml of Kirsch for like around $100 or $110 or so. Everywhere that I've seen who have actually sold the 100 ml bottle, they all seem to be sold out right now. But I believe I've seen like the 100 ml of Kirsch go for like 170. To me, for this to be a niche fragrance company and, a niche fragrance, I would say the 170 for Kirsch, in my opinion anyway, is definitely worth, spending. That's basically like designer prices, right now. For a niche fragrance that has the sort of, unisex sex appeal that it has to it, and the quality that it has to it, and also the performance, to me, Kirsch makes a little bit more sense, in my opinion, just if we're talking about just overall smell. Now, obviously, if, a $200 fragrance is, out of the question for you, then I do think that Chaos Extrait is still a very good choice. You just have to be a fan of cherry scents, and I would say leather, for sure. Again, even though this has less leather than what the original has, this is still a very prominently leathery scent. And to me also, it kind of has like a slightly more like smokier, you could almost say kind of more incensey type of smell than what the original Kirsch does. So, again, I think some of those tweaks or changes, that are made in Chaos, some may welcome, especially like the toned down leather note. I just think that the way that it's done in the original fragrance is done a little bit better. All right. Now for the performance on Chaos, this still is a very good performing scent. The projection to me is not as good as what it is in the Kirsch, but it's like not that far behind. So, I would say if we're gonna give like Kirsch a baseline of like 10 for like the projection, which we'll say is like at about an arm's length or so, possibly a little bit more, I would say this is like a 8.5 out of 10. So I mean, it's not really that far off from what Kirsch is. But again, this one just kind of wears slightly different. To me, it does wear slightly thicker, and it's not as sort of airy as what the original is. But with that being said, it still doesn't project as good, in my opinion. And then for the actual longevity on Chaos, this is still an 8+ hour fragrance for sure. So the performance on this is definitely pretty good. I felt like Kirsch definitely, it definitely was stronger, further on down the line than what this was. So like once you start getting to like around hours 6 and 7 or so and beyond that, felt like Kirsch was a little bit stronger, but not really by that much. Again, this still lasts well over 8 hours. And I feel like for the price that you pay for this, this definitely does have, you know, good performance just straight out of the box. Like no sort of maturation needed or anything like that. This definitely does perform straight out of the box. Now, for my closeness rating on Chaos compared to Kirsch, to me, this is going to be more sort of like a 80% close. So very solid, you know, again, to me, I think more so what they did with this was they more so kind of did like a twist on this. I don't think that this is necessarily like trying to be a one-to-one. They just, you know, weren't able to get there because of materials or whatnot. I think this one more so is purposely trying to be a twist. You know, especially with the fact that the leather note is toned down a lot more in this, as well as them not really going into like that sake note as much. I think that probably was done intentionally. And I mean, it's still a very solid fragrance. You know, to me, again, I feel like Kirsch is a little bit more, you could say, unisex. I still think that this is unisex, but I think because this one comes across a little bit more sweeter and less leathery, I think, you know, maybe you could make the argument that this could be a little bit more, you know, feminine leaning. I'm not, again, calling this a feminine leaning scent, but I do think that, you know, if you're going to match it up with Kirsch, I think Kirsch is going to be like straight down the middle, unisex. And then I would say maybe this might lean maybe 5 to 10% more towards the feminine side, but definitely still very much unisex. All right. Now for my overall rating on this, I would still give this a solid like 7.5 out of 10. So this is still a very solid fragrance. I don't think I'm going to keep this fragrance because I do actually want to get my hands on the original Kirsch. I actually did like that fragrance that much. So I do want to try to get my hands on that fragrance. If I can hopefully get a full bottle of it, that would be nice. If not, then I can definitely settle for, you know, the 30 ml. I have tons of fragrances, so I'll probably never go through that 30 ml. But yeah, man, I would say this as an alternative, I would still definitely recommend, you know, especially if you're not able to get your hands on the original, but this is available where you're at, then yeah, I would definitely say pick this one up. Or if you're someone who just can't afford to spend $170 on a fragrance, then I would say, yeah, definitely still pick this one up. You know, again, if you like sweet cherry, kind of like suede-y, leathery, and like slightly boozy types of scents, then this is for sure going to be up your alley. It's just not going to have like the most versatility. So to me, this is going to be more of like a fall, winter, springtime scent, I would say. More so kind of fall, winter, I think, but definitely you could get away with this in the spring for sure. This would not be a summer fragrance at all, at least not to me. Not unless you live somewhere where it's a little bit more moderate in the summertime, and maybe you're wearing this on like a cool summer night where it's maybe like low 60s and below. Then, you know, something like that, I think it would still work in that situation. But at least for me out here, I don't think this would work at all in the summertime. All right. So that is my take on Chaos Extrait as well as Vulcan Baie from French Avenue. Definitely let me know what you all think about these two fragrances in the comments below. Also, I'll have links in the description to where you can pick both of these up. And if you're brand new to the channel, do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe. And again, that's Jamar from Vegas Scents. I'll see y'all in the next video.